My name is Khaled Elgindy. I'm a fellow with the Center for Middle East Policy at the Brookings Institution in Washington. And I'm very pleased this morning to be the moderator for this very interesting and very timely panel on advancing women's role in an unstable Middle East. This discussion, I think, in many ways is a continuation of an ongoing conversation that we've been having in the various working groups and plenaries on pluralism. As many of you know, women suffer disproportionately from conflict and poverty around the world, and certainly the Middle East and North Africa region is no exception. While the last quarter century or so has seen major gains in areas like health and education in terms of, for example, we have near universal education for young girls, which is a major progress in the last quarter century. And the fact that more women are currently enrolled at the university level in the region than men. Nevertheless, these have not yet translated into a more equal role in the economic, political, and civic life of these societies. The status of women in many ways, I think, has paralleled other political developments in the region. Thus, many of you remember, I think we all remember, the iconic images of Tahrir Square. And we saw an initial surge in women's participation in those protests. And in Egypt, in Tunisia, in places like Yemen and Syria, we saw this great surge. Women were part and parcel of these mass movements. But we also saw that they were followed in many instances by an immediate pushback by the existing power structures, both the old regimes and other conservative social forces. Attacks on women were in fact part and parcel of the counter-revolution as well as the counter-revolutionary narrative. Many of you may remember in the case of Egypt, the cases of virginity tests in Tahrir Square that were conducted on many women activists there. The famous blue bra woman who was beaten and dragged in the streets by Egyptian security authorities, and other such instances. At the same time, we've also seen an even more dangerous trend, the rise of groups like IS, or ISIL, however you like to name it, has created new dangers for women and girls, both directly in places like Syria, Iraq, Libya, and elsewhere, in terms of various atrocities that we've heard about, rapes, enslavement of girls and women, and so on, but also indirectly, both because of the conservative nature of counter-revolutionary forces in general, and because efforts to advance women's inclusion have taken a backseat to other more, quote-unquote, pressing matters like economic and security concerns. The reality is, however, that the importance of gender equality and equity in successful development is undeniable. This has been established by economists and other social scientists. The data has borne this out quite convincingly. It's clear now that women are essential to economic growth as both wage earners and producers. For example, women in developing countries produce between 60 to 80% of food crops. Moreover, investments in girls and women, social investment, political investment, often return multiple times the dividends in terms of improving the well-being of their children, families, and communities. And this is particularly true in the case of education. And so with that, I think we'll go ahead and begin our conversation. Before we do, let me quickly, you have their bios in your bio book, but let me quickly introduce our speakers. All three of our speakers, our distinguished panelists today, have hands-on and on-the-ground experience working in an array of different capacities. Dr. Sakena Yacoobi is founder and chief executive officer of Afghan Institute of Learning, an NGO that provides services in education, health, and training in Afghanistan. She is seated in the center. Dr. Asha Elmi, to her right, is a Somali politician and activist for peace and women's rights. She is a member of the Somali National Parliament and founder and chairwoman of Save Somali Women and Children, a non-governmental humanitarian organization working to advance Somali women's rights and inclusion in a traditionally patriarchal society. And she will talk about women in peacemaking, among other things. And all the way to at the end of seated at the end is Muna Elgindy, a Syrian-American attorney specializing in immigration and civil rights in the United States. She is also a cooperating attorney for the Michigan chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union and is an active member of the Syrian diaspora and opposition groups, including United for a Free Syria and Coalition for a Democratic Syria. And she is a member of the Syrian National Council. So please join me in welcoming our speakers, and we'll go ahead and begin our conversation. Everybody has their mics, right? Yeah. So, is this on? Is this one on? Wow, yeah, that's good. Okay, I'll try not to speak too loudly. So I think I'll begin with Dr. Sakena, since I mentioned how education in particular has been very crucial in promoting not just women, but sort of uplifting the society as a whole. One place where actually there has been an exception in terms of the regional trend is Afghanistan, as far as girls' education. And that's an area that you've been involved in. Can you tell us why this has been a priority for you, why you've prioritized education in particular for girls, and what challenges and successes you've had in your work, and maybe give us an idea of the broader situation with regard to women in Afghanistan, since it has been out of the news in recent times.
Thank you very much. First of all, we are talking about Afghanistan. Afghanistan that has been invaded by Russia, and Afghanistan that all of you know that for many, many years, almost 35 years, have been out of reach because of education, lack of education. So in a country like Afghanistan, when you are in a conflict situation, still we have war in Afghanistan. Still there is, every day there are a situation that we have our hand full of, challenges. But how are you going to start in that kind of society to do anything to improve the life of the women? The women who have suffered for 35 years, the women who have been out of school, out of job, out of opportunity for 35 years, how are you get them involved into the trying to build their capacity and empower these women? We think that the most important key issue for Afghan women are education. And if you educate the women of Afghanistan, I think that you really pull out the society from poverty, because, women are more than half of the population, 50% to 60% of the population are women. And these women have been denied their right. And so, in order for them to be involved and to ask for their right and be able to participate in political arena or economical arena, they need to have education. And if they do not have this education, I don't think we can accomplish that much. Because of that, EIL has been working for 20 years, trying to really develop an institute that it's really educate the women. But education, what kind of education? When we talk about education, education that is really bring critical thinking, because any education is not going to helpful just to say they are able to read and write, but that's not sufficient in education. What we are trying to do in Afghanistan right now, we are trying to bring a critical thinking kind of education that people ask the question. People will be able to really change their life, transform themselves. And that happened in Afghanistan. Yes, we have a lot of challenge, but at the same time, I can tell you that the women of Afghanistan today are completely different from the women of Afghanistan 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or 20 years ago. We have improved our life, but do we have challenges? One thing that Afghanistan in poverty, we don't have sufficient resource. We don't have sufficient schooling. We don't have sufficient buildings, sufficient teachers. The teachers in Afghanistan are not earning enough money. And one teacher, if they go to the classroom, they have to perform 3 or 4 jobs before they come to the classroom. And when you know that, when you are performing 3 other jobs besides teaching in the classroom, you are not concentrating and you are really tasked. So as a result, teachers are really sort of not themselves. They are not in the classroom. Their mind is all over. So teacher training is the most important, crucial things for us to do. And that's what EIL is doing. We are continuously do train teacher. And when do training the teacher, we train in a student-centered technique that they really work with the students and they build relationship with the students, especially the students that have been traumatized, students that have been through war, students that they are poor, students that they don't have any resource to come to school. So it's need a special care for a teacher to really build a relationship with that students. That's we are working. And it has been a challenge, but we are accomplishing. But one thing that I really would like to really emphasize in here, that absorbing culture and tradition is very, very important for Afghan society to really work with the teacher. If we are not absorbing culture and tradition, we are not able to do our job. But how we are doing that? We do through community after community. We really build a relationship with the community to really they trust us. In a country that have been invaded by Russia, have been war, so it is very hard for people to trust us. And so in order for us to really reach our program, reach out our women, we must build trust between the people. And once you build this trust, then the community by itself is really supporting you. One thing that I am so fortunate to talk about it, in Afghanistan, this issue of sectarianism and this, yes, we have 7 ethnic groups. Yes, people have been fighting for this. But right now what we are trying to do, we really try to say, if you ask me, where are you from? I say, I'm from Afghanistan. If you ask me, what is my religion or what sex I belong to, I say I'm a Muslim. I'm a Muslim Afghan. And that is our educational terminology, that we are trying to really create this vocabulary between our academic level that everybody will say, we are Muslim, we are Afghan. And because of that, we have improved thousands and thousands of lives. And as a result, a variety of groups are working together. Afghanistan have been a country that for many, many years, different groups work together under one umbrella. What is wrong now that we are saying, okay, this group or that group, or we are not able to really live peacefully with each other? So through education, and a very valuable education, and an education that there is no difference between black and white, no difference between Shia and Sunni, no difference between Tajik and Hazara. That kind of education that we create, we are accomplishing that people are coming together. Yes, it takes time. It takes a lot of time for Afghanistan because, again, we are dealing with a society that have been completely out for 35 years from education. But there are a lot of challenges. And those challenges is that we want that our government give us a a environment that we will be able to do our work. We don't have peace yet. Security is the biggest challenge in Afghanistan. Still, the women could not go to places from place to place by themselves. They have to go with a mahram, or they have to go by car. If they don't have a facility, they don't have a car, so their life is in danger. So I would like to go again talk about it.
Okay, if I could just follow up on a couple of points that you said. You talked about the security problems, you talked about difficulties with resources, as well as the cultural issues and so on. What are the biggest challenges you face? Do they stem mainly from cultural resistance to what you're trying to do? Is it a lack of resources? Is it primarily, is it legal and governmental restrictions? Or is it the overall security situation? If you could identify, what is the main challenge that you face?
Okay, I can give you an example. For example, we would love to go to all provinces of Afghanistan. Right now, we are only working for 11 provinces of Afghanistan. We are not able to go there because there is war, because there is kidnapping, there is killing, there is a lot of poisoning the school. Things like this is happening in Afghanistan.
Right.
But our government will not be able to really protect us because we don't have a resource. Government of Afghanistan, they do not have resource right now. They don't have trained soldiers. They do not have resource available for us to give us a protection. So if we have that protection, we will be able to travel. As recently, we just launched a radio channel because we felt it that our material have been very impactful in the whole society. People are learning. We have educational material, we have health material, and we have awareness. We do a lot of democracy, citizenship, how a good citizen can work. What is a good citizenship? These material, peaceful material, these have been very quality that people appreciate that. But there are areas that we could not go there. And so for us to reach for that area, we just launched a radio station that we can broadcast those material through a radio station that we can give it to the people. So for me, I think the biggest challenge right now is security. If the security issue is taken care, so then we can really work and really reach out more and more our civil society to bring transformation. Transformation has taken place in Afghanistan. Today you could see women lawyer, women doctor, women engineer, women teacher, but the issue is that, are they enough? We don't have enough of it. We live in a country that for 35 years, education have been banned for people. Today, overnight is not going to be. It's a long-term process. It's not short-term process.
Right.
Thank you.
And we'll come back to a lot of these issues that you touched on. Okay. But for now, let's move on to hear from Asha, who you've worked in an area you're best known for. Working to advance Somali women's participation in an area traditionally dominated by men, specifically in peacemaking. And you're best known for a very innovative and sort of groundbreaking initiative called the Sixth Clan, which is to bring women into the peacemaking process directly. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How you've done that? Tell us about the initiative itself, but also what is it that women bring to the process of peacemaking that men don't, since men are mostly responsible for the conflicts in the first place?
Well, thank you, and good morning, everyone. As you may all know that Somalia has been in a devastating conflict for the past 24 years. And Somali women and their children have been the first and the last victims of that senseless and deadly civil war. We have gone through warlordism, anarchy, and religious extremism. Creating the Sixth Clan was a very instrumental, courageous, and clarity vision from the women. During that time when Somalia were still at war, there has been a lot of attempts from the international community, from the regional governments, bringing the Somali warlords and function leaders together in order for them to bring a solution for Somalia. Unfortunately, most of those attempts were failed because the real people were not participating in all this conference. That is the civil society, the women group, and the traditional. The sixth clan came to existence in 2000 when an innovative conference came up. The president of Djibouti took the initiative to convene Somali conference, and we were invited. A very small group of women, including myself, were invited to be part of the designing process. We were given the first chance to be part of the reconciliation process ever in the Somali history. And we had our own agenda. We had our own vision as a woman. We knew right from the beginning what we are going to achieve in that conference. Unfortunately, when our engagement and our involvement were seen by the traditional clan elders, because Somalia is patriarchal society, dominated by male-dominated, and also the religious extremism has always been there. So everybody was against us, the participation of the women. And they all united to hinder us in the participation of that important historic conference. We had the courage to stood up and say no. We vehemently opposed that injustice from the clan elders and from some of the religious groups there. And we stood our ground. We united among ourselves as a woman, and we made one voice, the women's voice. And since the conference, the participation of the conference was clan-based, there was no space and role for the women to come in. So we formed our own identity as the sixth clan, the women's clan, which has never been the case. So the sixth clan was given the recognition because we did not ask the clan elders and the religious leaders to allow our participation. We fought for everything, and it was the unity among ourselves and the clarity of the vision and the courage that really helped us. And we achieved our goal. The Djibouti president recognized our voice because we were very strong, very united, very committed, and we never wanted to accept anyone to completely abandon and marginalize us from our own rights, because the women, as I said earlier, were the overwhelming majority who were the victims of the war itself. So we wanted to bring our voice in the decision making, in the participation of the conference. Luckily, when we were recognized as a very strong and reckoning voice, we were given the space, and the women elected me to be the leader of the sixth clan, the women's clan. So through that identity, we went to the high negotiation table as equal partners in decision making. First time in the history of Somalia, women has always been at the periphery. They never participated in such important exercise. So as my capacity as the women's representative and the women's leader, first thing I did, the first day I joined the conference, was I strongly demanded to be given the women their share in the constitution, in the charter drafting, because before we joined the conference was already moving on without the participation of the women. And we got 5 women to be included in the charter drafting committee. And it was a clever strategic and clear strategy behind that, which was, if we don't institutionalize our rights, no one was going to give us. So the 5 women, among them 2 lawyers, were completely tasked to put women in the women's rights in the Constitution, how our participation actually changed the whole Somali political landscape and the whole progression of the conference. The first conference, that was the ARTA conference, which the Somali women fully participated, was the first one to produce some positive results. That was the first time that we all agreed to form an interim government where now women have a clear space, because our revolution, I call it a revolution, bloodless revolution, enables Somali women to have their rightful space in the conference. And having that space, we also contributed positively to the conference, because as a woman, we become the uniting force, even among the divided men who were participated in the conference, because our main aim was, number one, for that conference to produce a positive result. So women were the force, the engine behind pushing and encouraging the women to reach a peaceful agreement. Secondly, we wanted to institutionalize our rights as a woman. So we used the conference itself as a springboard to fully participate in the political process. Had it not been for that innovative initiative and strategy of forming our own identity, the Sixth Clan, as an identity and mechanism to participate in the conference, we wouldn't have the political achievement that we have today, because Somali women have a quota in the Somali, in that charter, the ARTA charter, we put 25 seats. Women were allocated 25 seats.
Out of how many? Out of how many total?
275 members of parliament. We also had the first Somali female prime minister. The idea of the Sixth Clan, that strategy gave Somali women the political visibility they enjoy today. And it is a legacy that we are leaving for our own daughters, because somewhere they may not have the courage and the experience that we had. So we made for them. We are leaving a legacy for them. Today, I'm happy that they are all politically aware. We sensitize the women and the girls and the young generation. And we have arrived at a stage where now they can take the leadership from us. So Somali women are very visible in the political front, but still there are a huge gap when it comes to economic opportunities and economic empowerment and education. And I believe education and economic empowerment are two fundamental pillars for women's political visibility and women's advancement and women's day-to-day life. Even very much experience in women can play a very important role in security itself. They can contribute positively to the security. What I learned from the practical situation is that the strategy of war on terror is lacking one important strategic thing, which is the community intelligence. And I'm very much confident and experienced that women can make the gateway to community intelligence. Unfortunately, they have not been used effectively, and the women's capacity as a very intelligent source have not been used. So I'm recommending that women should be given the chance to participate in contributing positively to the security. Again, economic opportunity is very important. If the mothers are not given the power to control on their sons and husbands, I think it is a disaster, and we have seen the result of that. What would you expect a mother of 8, 7, or 6 sons, yet cannot afford to feed them one meal? What kind of power will she have on them? So economic empowerment is absolutely very essential in contributing positively to the security. If the mothers are empowered and given the power that they need, they will absolutely control the recruitment, and they will give their sons a chance to go to school. So economic empowerment as a means of giving an alternative source, alternative income to the mothers is very critical, it's very essential, it's not an optional.
Right, so it's fascinating actually. You've made a direct link between women's economic empowerment and the broader security situation and the security implications and potential benefits of that. Let's turn now to Muna on another conflict zone that you are unfortunately intimately familiar with. As someone who's worked both in Syria and in the Syrian diaspora, tell us a little bit about what you've seen personally and how it's impacted you personally, but also the impact that you've seen on women given the various crises, the situation of the refugees, the oppression of the regime, as well as brutal forces like IS operating in Syria. So can you give us an idea of what you've seen and the challenges that women face?
Sure. Thank you, Khaled. What I think is interesting is that the Syrian conflict is relatively recent compared to my colleagues in Somalia and Afghanistan. So the role of women, even in this short period of time, has actually changed. So I'm sure, as you know, in most of the Middle East, the idea of civil society really didn't exist. And so you had women who were not involved in civil society because it did not exist. And just to give you an example, you know, I had some friends in the Damascus suburb of Daraya in the mid-2000s that decided to organize a cleanup crew. And so they wanted to clean up the streets, and they were passing out, you know, pamphlets that said, you know, cleanliness is part of your faith, and they were arrested en masse, and they were imprisoned en masse. And the challenge was that basically you are saying, by doing this, you are saying that the government is not doing its job, and they viewed that as a threat. So something as simple as a neighborhood cleanup was not allowed to develop. So when the revolution began in 2011, it actually created a lot of space, and women participated in that space, I would say, quite healthily, especially in the area of the nonviolence movement. It was about organizing demonstrations and, you know, civil disobedience, and women participated in that. And initially, there was a lot of space for that. When it became militarized, that changed, of course. Women were no longer fighters. And then you had huge numbers of refugees, majority of whom were women and children, and internally displaced, majority of whom were women and children. And so when it became
Can
armed—
you give us a quick sense of the numbers?
Well, there's about 4 million registered refugees in the neighboring countries, and there's 7.5 million internally displaced. You're talking about a population, Syrian population previously, that was between 21 and 23 million. So half the population are either out or internally displaced. So, you know, initially there was this room for organizing, and then afterwards, you know, when it became armed, basically, as you know, in armed conflicts, he who has the gun makes the rules. So it actually sort of flipped it a little bit. So what happened was women had to go a little bit more behind the scenes. Those that were left in the country had to go behind the scenes in order to be participating in the civil disobedience. But on the outside, Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, women have been very active in the refugee camps, in the areas of humanitarian aid and in education. As soon as that the refugee population began leaving the country and establishing these camps outside the country, many women began getting involved. But even during this civil disobedience time, women were arrested, women were tortured, and rape was used. I think this was a big factor in women sort of going behind the scenes. We saw it particularly, and it's been documented, particularly systematically in Homs, where women were being taken and raped and then returned. It was sort of a weapon of war that was being used and continues to be used, and specifically in the area of Homs and in the suburbs of Damascus. So if you're familiar, I don't know if you're familiar with Caesar. He was a military photographer, and he was given the responsibility of taking pictures of those that were killed in regime prisons, and he leaked them out subsequently. And I know just, I think in March, we work with the Caesar team on this from the U.S. perspective. Our organizations work with the Caesar team, and we released a trove of those pictures back in March, and many of them are women. So, women have been arrested for the same reason the men were arrested, but then of course they have the added victimization of sexual crime against them. So the rise of ISIS, I think, and Jabhat al-Nusra and those type of extremist groups really has made it much more difficult for women. You had women who, in the beginning of the revolution, were really focused on, there's this regime that we're fighting against, and we want freedom for Syrians, freedom for everybody, and that's going to be our focus. Then you have the rise of this extremist groups, where now they're fighting two fronts, or I would say multiple fronts, where, you had mentioned, the issue of traveling for women. That was never an issue in Syria. Women traveling, like security in terms of women being afraid, the demographics, the natural demographics of Syria, that was never a concern. But now, a woman will get stopped. Why, how are you traveling and you don't have a man with you? So now you have women who are going to be traveling less and focused really either on their local behind the scenes, or they're going to be working outside of the country. In terms of political, women have gotten involved in local councils. So each of the liberated areas have local councils that provide basically the services that the government no longer provides since it doesn't exist there. And women were more involved initially, but then the rise of ISIS, women again had to take a back seat with that. So, I think in a short period of time, the Syrian women have sort of seen that there was space, and then that space constricted for them. On a political front, and you spoke, Asha, about politics. On a political front, the Syrian women, in terms of political opposition, have really not had real representation in that arena. I'm somebody that's anti-tokenism. So the idea that you just add a woman so you can parade her around and say, look here, we have a woman, when really there's no meaningful engagement, is disingenuous. And it's not just disingenuous in terms of appearance, it's disingenuous for your country. You were speaking, Aisha, about rebuilding and peace initiatives post-conflict. You cannot, and the argument that people make is, really, are we going to, especially in the Syrian conflict, I'm sure you're familiar, the Syrian National Council became 400 and some members. And before a new entity called the Syrian Opposition Coalition was created. But the Syrian National Council was 400 people, and there was this struggle about every single minority group wanting representation, right? So, we used to make a joke, we used to say a joke, خلينا نحفر من تحت الأرض مشان نلاقي لنا أقلية تانية. Like, let's dig under the earth to find one more minority, because the Syrian National Council isn't big enough. And initiatives to include women as one group really weren't taken very seriously under the guise of now is not the time. And the reason why I find this an oxymoronical sort of conversation is while simultaneously, and I would say the Syrian opposition as well as the international community, including the UN, were encouraging to the point of really forcing this expansion to have representatives of all of these minority groups, there was not any focus on women. And the idea of including minority groups is important, because the idea is you want a group that actually represents the Syrian people. In that light, how do you then exclude 50% of the voice of the Syrian people? And that seems to be, it's not a solely Syrian issue, it's I think just a worldwide issue that women's voices are seen as, not as important right now. So you have 50% of the population not represented in the political sphere. Then what does that do, for example, post-conflict? We know men make wars, women try to help solve them. And these peace initiatives will not happen purely with politics, and they will not purely happen with military. You need the female base to create the harmony in society post-conflict. Where are you going to get that base from if you have not engaged them during the conflict?
Right. I mean, there's a fundamental paradox. On the one hand, when in moments of crisis, women are sort of pushed further back. And yet at the same time, they are the very constituency that is, they have a disproportionate stake in what is happening in that crisis, because not only are they affected by the same bombs and sieges and refugee crises that everyone else is, but there are, on top of that, other forms of victimization. I'm very fascinated by the idea of, by merely including women, by sort of imposing women's inclusion into the process, or onto the process, that itself can be a unifying force. Is that something, Mona, that you can see happening in the Syrian context? Is that applicable there as well?
You're referring to?
By sort of imposing women as part of the political dynamics within the opposition or vis-a-vis the regime, as well as on the ground in these civic groups or local councils, and sort of forcing women's participation. Do you see the potential for that, not just to promote and uplift women, but as a way of being a unifying force, since obviously women are the one constituency that sort of cut across all sects and all echelons of society? Is that in itself a unifying force, or?
It is, and I would like to point out, even on the issue of sectarianism, women, the Syrian women have had a better ability to dialogue amongst ethnic and religious groups than the men have. And I think that presence is important, because when we're talking about unifying, we're talking about unifying Syria. And we have that sectarianism that exists now, particularly, I think, against the Alawis, between the Alawis and the majority Sunnis. And I think that women play a key role in that. In terms of imposing women, I'm not a quota person. I see what quotas did in Lebanon, and I'm not a fan of that idea. But I have found in the Syrian context that when women have been imposed into processes, they actually, it turns into meaningful engagement. So whatever the hesitation is, the wall sort of from the beginning, I've realized it's not that thick of a wall. So once that wall is traversed, that I find that women are able to participate in a more meaningful way. But that imposition, I believe, has to happen. And that imposition has to be internally. The Syrian people, the Syrian women have to organize and force their voice. I also think that the The Syrian organizations, whether civil society, political, need to be cognizant of it. And I also think external forces like the UN, like the regional governments that are, deeply involved in the Syrian conflict, really need to take a leadership role in this. And I don't see that, I haven't seen that happening.
Okay. I want to put one, you might call it a philosophical question, but a broad question to each of you. And I'd like you each to sort of be as brief as you can, because we want to go to the audience, both our physical audience, but also on social media, to take some of their questions as well. But in terms of how we approach this issue, is it best to focus in on women-specific or female-specific issues like girls' education, like bringing women into the peacemaking process? Or is it better to focus on sort of a broader, emphasis on equal citizenship for all, regardless of gender, regardless of sect or race or ethnicity? Is the principle of equality, is it more important, or is it more crucial to be targeted and work on specific women-specific issues, or some combination of the two? I'm curious on your thoughts given your experiences. Let's start with Asha.
Thank you. That is a very pertinent question. Actually, our number one priority as a women is to have a healthy communities and to create a healthy citizenship. Our first role and responsibility is to completely secure the civilian participation, the civic participation, number one, and secondly, the individual right. And when it comes to individual rights, in certain circumstances and societies, for example, the patriarch society and countries in conflict and countries under extremism, always women take the burden. Always women are seen as a soft target, and women's rights are always marginalized. And that is where now the responsibility coming in, and it will force us, it compel us to take the risk and the responsibility to ensure and to safeguard and to stand for the women's rights. And as an experience, it is a lesson that I learned all those years that I have been engaging and involving in promoting peace and in protecting Somali women's human rights, especially when it comes to political participation. And I would like to share that experience with all of you. The number one enemy that completely marginalized women in the participation of their own political process is the division among themselves. So my advice to all of you is that let women first take their responsibility to articulate their agenda as a woman. You have to forget about the clans. I know sometimes it's a reality on the ground, the sectarianism and the clan division and the political division as well. But when it comes to women's participation, the number one enemy is the disunity of the women. Women should unite and articulate their agenda despite their own personal, clan, or religious difference. Otherwise, they will not make any significant impact on the political process. Number two is that if women don't participate the process itself, there is no way that they will be part of the product. That is another lesson that I learned. If women want to be part of the product, they should be part of the process. Another unfortunate is that, and that is what I've seen in our practical life, my own practical experience, under certain circumstances, the international community don't play their role effectively. For example, when there is such kind of division, political division and sectarian tension, they always focus on the political tension. Their main aim is to reach some sort of political agreement. They don't implement, and they are not committed to the UN conventions. That is an experience that I learned from the ground. So we, as a women, took that responsibility. It was our own initiative. It was homegrown initiative. No one did not impose our government in the conference to give women their share. I would also like to touch the issue of the quota, because Muna has touched the quota. Muna, through experience, I believe that the quota, despite the fact that quota has its weakness, but in reality, quota is a gateway, it's an entrance point to women's participation under such circumstances. So quota is a powerful tool. Maybe we may not continue quotas when we reach some sort of political stability, but at the moment, quota is very critical, and women needed to have quota. That is the only ticket that women can participate. In our experience, had it not been for that strategic thinking, you will never see a Somali woman in the Somali parliament, as well as the Somali political arena, because traditionally the way it is, because the marginalization itself is a systematic, it's a structural one. The tradition, the patriarchy, the male dominance, the religion itself is used as a pretext to absolutely sideline and marginalize the women. So we have to be proactive in terms of compromise ourselves. We have to have our own agenda as a woman. We have to focus on what we unite us and leave behind the elements that divide us. Otherwise, we are not practicing what we are preaching.
Thank you for that. Dr. Sakena, I want to come to you. But before I do, I just want to remind everyone who is on Twitter that we are using the hashtag U.S Islam 15. I apologize to our comms people. I neglected to mention that up front. But we are going to go to Twitter to take some questions shortly. Dr. Sakena, the same issue on the balance between women-specific or female-specific work and working more broadly to promote the idea of equal rights and equal citizenship.
Thank you very much. I really believe that strongly that for women, first priority should be education. If they are highly educated, they could request their right. If it's political, if it's economical, if it's social. So when they are highly educated, there is not any excuse to say that the woman got a position, but they are not capable of doing the work. So for me, it's really, for example, we have quota that the woman can be in a political arena, but anybody be appointed in a political arena to be an MP or to be a governor or to be a district level councillor. But if they are not capable of doing their job, then let's give a bad name to the women. So my issue is that first, let's educate our women, train our women in a quality education that they will be able to perform the task that they should. And that is one thing that I think that is very important. Second things, I think that legal system that we have right now in Afghanistan, it's really preventing a lot of issues that it's not really fair. Legal system. So we really need to concentrate on our legal system that when there is an issue, so that it will be fairness equal everywhere, if it's men or women. And right now, men or women suffering for that. Specifically, a woman right now also in economical situation. If a woman are not able to provide food on the table for their children, and if their health is not good, how do they can concentrate to be a good citizen? How do they can concentrate to really perform their task? So for me, also, economical status for women are very priority. A good citizenship is important for a woman when they are capable to perform health-wise. For example, right now, the health issue in Afghanistan is so bad for women, so that mortality, morbidity rate, one is the second highest in the world. So this is, again, is something to have to look onto it. And another issue for Afghan women, they are capable, they are very smart, intelligent, and they are taking part. They are not that they are afraid of it. They have opportunity to take part. But the point is that if they take a part, if there is not a security issue, they are ready to take their part, but the security issue is stopping them. So they are not able to go to their office. They are not able to go to their school. They are not able to go somewhere to be safe, you know. So creating a safe environment for women is the most important things that I think for women to really build their capacity and be empowered. And so these are issues for us.
And in terms of in constitutional terms, should the emphasis be on incorporating articles, for example, in the Constitution that specify women's rights or equality for women, or is it better to sort of focus to include language that is broad, that all citizens, regardless of gender, race, sect, and so on, be treated equally before the law? Because that's a fundamental tenet of the concept of citizenship.
Well, to tell you the truth, the Constitution right now, Afghanistan has one of the best constitutional law that in the Muslim society.
In terms of the text.
In the text. The text is there, but how we are implementing, that's another issue. So for me, Constitution is important if it's be implemented. Right now, it's not implemented in Afghanistan. So the task is there, but what we are doing with it, we are not really using it that much. So my point is that really, let's preach as we practice. Don't preach and not practice. Right. So that is, for me, it's very important.
Okay, Mona.
Just briefly, I would say that they're not mutually exclusive ideas, that fighting for women's rights does not mean that you're not also fighting for equal citizenship. They're one and the same. I think when it comes to women's issues, really women, we know, if women don't fight for it, you're not going to get it. So we have to be the ones that are focused on women's issues in order to advance the equal citizenship. So that's one point. I think secondly, from the Syrian perspective, I know that the Syrian American community, the diaspora community, the Syrian diaspora community, I think has been very important in the Syrian conflict, whether it's from a humanitarian perspective or whether it's from an advocacy perspective. And I know that the Syrian American community, we have a couple of umbrella organizations, one that's focused on advocacy has 6 organizations, and one that's focused on relief work, and it has 22 organizations. And we've paid attention to the issue of women and women's involvement. And I know Khaled, you and I were talking about this yesterday, but I felt that it was natural as part of the sort of Syrian framework. It was natural that women got involved, and when we did, I you know, speaking to my other colleagues, none of us experienced difficulty in sort of taking leadership roles if we were competent to do so. Now, and we also have an annual women's conference where we discuss these issues. And I think part of the role of the diaspora community is that we have the ability, because, you know, Syria is in the midst of a conflict. Barrel bombs are being dropped by the regime today, you know, on various parts of the country. They are not convening to discuss women's rights and women's roles. So I feel like that's a key role that we in the diaspora community have, that it's, you know, we don't want the conflict to end and then it be like, okay, well, where are the women? And we have to start from scratch. So our role, I think, out from the outside is we help create that conversation. So a few of us, a delegation of us went and met with the UN envoy to Syria, de Mistura, a few days ago. And, you know, we had women from the Syrian American community, we have women that are represented. We make sure that we have women representation in this, and we make sure that we're having this conversation so that when the conflict is over, there is something that's been happening on the political front that can sort of transition as opposed to, okay, now let's start from scratch.
Thank you. I think we have some questions.
I don't know, how much time do we have? 15? Okay. So why don't we, should we start with our online questions first?
Thank you. There are two questions from Twitter that have come up. One is, what role can men play in supporting the position of women? And the other is, what role can family planning play?
Any of you can tackle, or all of you who would like to address Sakena, yeah?
Yes, I think that men can play a huge role in women issue, because men are the one who really are holding women back. So I think that women should understand that men should understand that women has the potential, has the capacity, and give them the space. So I think that the more we work with women, also work with men to let them to understand that what is the problem with them, why they are afraid of women, why they are afraid of education of the women. And for example, in a position of a leadership, right now in Afghanistan, we have a very strong women who are leader. And so everybody is afraid of them. They are stopping them. So let's understand what they can do. For many, many years, the country has been run by men. Let's have some women in a position of leadership, see what they can do it. So that is one issue that I really...
And do you encourage women, since all women have men in their family, their brothers, fathers, sons, and so on, do you encourage them to deal directly on that?
Of course. For example, I just want to share this, that the beginning when Afghan Institute of Learning, AIL, was working in the issue of women, there were men who asked us that they want to be involved. At that time, we could not support men. But now we are really helping men and women side by side and encouraging the children, especially from the preschool to high school to university, that they will be fair with their sister, with their mother, with their wife. If they are fair, if they see the woman as as someone who are equal with them, then that will they carry to outside. So we are doing that.
Okay. And Asha and Mona, do either of you want to tackle that or the family planning question?
Yeah.
I think that's a very interesting one.
This one.
You want to tackle this one? Okay.
To add something.
Sure, please.
In my experience, I think women issues are social issues. And the responsibility of those issues are not for only the women to carry on. We need the men to be supportive in women's issue. I always take an example for myself, my husband. My husband has always been a staunch supporter of what I have been doing. The women's work, the women's rights, women's advancement. Right now, even my two sons are very much supportive. So we need that role. At national level, as an organization, when we were creating the Sixth Clan, had it not been for the strategic alliance that we forged within the men, some of the men were very supportive. And we came up with that idea to forge that strategic alliance. They did really support us. So without the men, I don't think that we can achieve a lot. But the trick here is that, and that's what I always share with the women, we don't let them to guide us, but we want them to support us, not to guide us and not to set our own agendas, but we need their support, because the concept is that women issues are social issues. So it needs both men and women to collaborate, to support, and to partner in these important issues of women issues as a social issues.
Thank you. Mona.
Just briefly, I think that, I know we're addressing the issue of men, and we talked about women sort of organizing together, but I think an important role that we didn't discuss is women as mothers raising their sons. And we have a responsibility in that raise our sons to understand and respect women, and that includes, in patriarchal societies, in the household, something simple like, the son has no responsibilities in the home, and it's the girl who's the daughter is the one who has to be providing these things. So just some basic, I think, issues with raising our sons, for the future. might lessen some of these larger issues that we have. But in terms of men, I think that one is that there needs to be a shift, and I think that what you said is important. We need to understand what is it that they fear, and there needs to be a shift in sort of the mentality that, you know, that it's a power struggle to make it actually a social justice issue. There is a segment of your society that is marginalized. That is something that everybody needs to work on. And I find that what I find interesting is even those that accept that and agree, men that accept that, many of them have a hard time breaking the barrier and speaking out because they're afraid of backlash. To come out and to say, yes, I support this, and participate in working groups, or come out in support of an initiative, even those that support it behind closed doors, you know, won't support it in a public arena. And we need to understand what is it that makes them afraid of taking these positions.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so we'll go ahead and take questions from our audience. I see 1, 2, 3. Why don't we take all 3 questions, and if we have time for another round, we'll do that. Salam, could you introduce yourself?
Sure.
And please keep it a question and as brief as possible. Thanks.
It's a great panel, first of all. I just want to thank you for having this. And my name is Salam Al-Mariati with the Muslim Public Affairs Council. Taking the title of the conference, Changing Assumptions, one of the assumptions that's been made is that Islam does not provide rights of women. And I want to ask all of you, if you can speak to what is it that needs to be changed in terms of our understanding of Islam to meet the challenges of achieving rights for women. Of course, a lot of people have been talking about reform, and there are issues of reform that we can presume to be departing from religion, but I think within the Islamic world context, you can't do that. So what is it within Islam that we can go to powers, authorities, to demand rights for women?
Very good question. There was one in the center. Yes, the lady in the back, please.
Hi, I'm Calvert Jones, University of Maryland. I just wanted to come back to the question of men's role in promoting women's independence and rights. And I was struck by something that you said about, that was said a couple times about men causing wars, women trying to solve them. I'm not sure that I entirely agree with that, but I did want to ask, you know, if that's the case, it kind of begs the question of how boys' education and boys' socialization can be improved. And you know, it also strikes me that in this region, in the Gulf, women's education is really skyrocketing at this time. Women outperforming men in education. If you go to UAE University, 70% female. And sometimes these women's issues, I think, are addressed in a kind of vacuum. And I was wondering specifically, would you have any recommendations for boys' education, boys' socialization, and how that issue might be addressed in concert with and in a way that facilitates women's progress as well? Thank you.
Great. And third, right up here.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Nahid Mustafa. I'm a journalist. My question is somewhat related to the first question, but it's not about Islam specifically. What I'm wondering is, in your experience, has the role of that voice, the sort of the religious voice, been a help or a hindrance in your efforts to create more inclusive spaces for women? And whether that's a clerical voice or sort of traditional religious voices in the area that you're working in.
Okay, thanks. So there's a lot to deal with there. Why don't, I mean, you're all welcome to comment on any or all, but if there's one specifically that you want to comment on, Sakena, which one?
First of all, I would like to say that why everybody is using religion as is something that is stopping women improvement or women empowerment. I think that one best example of it that you could see that as Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that was working with his wife as a businesswoman. She was a businesswoman, and he was using that money to just really as a military asset for working as jihad. So I think that why right now we are saying that women are prevented from going forward or building their capacity as a Muslim woman. As a Muslim woman, we didn't have any problem. If you really work according to Islam, according to the quote from Quran, and you use that as a guide for yourself, I don't think anything will stop you, because nobody could stop you. If you, that is one of the issues that right now Afghan Institute is learning is using it. We take quotation from Quran, and according to that, we perform our educational system. And there is nobody stop us. We have all kinds of educational program. Nobody stopped us. And also with performing our hijab and things like that, is nothing stop us. Nobody is telling us that why you are going to the university or why you are teaching students in that. But yes, we have to stand for our right. We have to say, as a Muslim woman, we have this right according to Quran, and we do have a lot of right according to Islam.
But is this conversation being had in the religious circles, amongst the scholars, in the Islamic political movements, in our mosques? Are these conversations being had at the local level and national level and beyond? Or is it simply sort of voices in the wilderness?
I really believe that this is being more outside sort of conversation than inside conversation, because in our society, in our national society, we are really using Quran, and we are going forward with it. But yes, of course, if somebody comes and do something that is against that, yes, they will be stopped. I think they will not be able to do their job, perform their job. But if you really do according to Islam and you use that quotation, and I don't think that you will be stopped.
Asha, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I'd like to add something. In my understanding, it's not the Islamic religion, the problem that hinders the women's political or rights participation. But there are two other challenges. One is the misinterpretation of the religion itself, and the lack of knowledge of the women, as women, lack of our knowledge that we don't know the religion, because traditionally it is the male child that is given the chance to go to Quranic school. The majority of the girls don't have that opportunity. So as women, we don't know our rights in Islam. If we don't know the religion, the Quran, and our rights, how do we claim our rights? So it is my, again, another lesson that I learned. We need, as women, women leaders, women advocates, women rights practitioners and activists, to learn the Quran and the religion and to know our rights. And we will be in a better position to claim our rights in Islam. Otherwise, they will take advantage of us because of our lack of knowledge and ignorance in the religion itself.
Right, so once again, the issue of education is central. It's
Absolutely.
formal and
Very,
informal
very
education,
central.
religious
Yes.
and non-religious education
Very
is
central.
central for boys and for girls alike. Do you want to tackle the question of the boys' education, or you want to?
Yeah,
Okay.
I wanted to comment on the role of religion, and I think Salam's question was, I think, spot on. I would say that the scholarship's silence on women's rights is deafening. So, you know, when Nahid asked, is there a hindrance? You know, is it a hindrance or is it a help? In the Syrian context, I think there was an advantage in that there are a couple of women's religious movements that really started from the higher educated and higher socioeconomic status, women, particularly in Damascus, started a movement that really just spread across the country. And, I know that a lot of Syrian Americans and a lot of Americans would go to Syria to go and learn with these women. So I think that we haven't been hearing, I know in mainstream for Syria, we haven't been hearing from scholars using religion as a hammer, like ISIS does, right? ISIS uses religion as a hammer, whether it's on women's issues or probably every other issue that in society that exists. So we haven't been hearing that. But I think on the flip side, we haven't been hearing anything positive either. And that to me is extremely detrimental for the Muslim community, wherever in the Muslim world, the Muslim community at large. And I think that it's an indication, too, of a lack of female scholarship, which I think is a larger issue for us to discuss. That's probably not the topic of today. But, 100 years after the Prophet ﷺ, there's about 40% of the ulama were women. Where are those women nowadays? So we are looking to a overwhelmingly male scholarship to comment on women's rights, when really we should be, as Muslim women, at the table having these conversations.
Except that in higher education, anyway, we have this disproportionate presence of women. Maybe there's an opportunity. I don't know how many of those women are studying Sharia and so forth. But in any case, do we have more time, or we are out of time? So, this has been a fascinating discussion, and I know we could probably go on for several more hours, but one clear takeaway in my head is that this conversation needs to happen not just on a stage in the Middle East, but in every household and in every corner of the globe. It's clear to me that women play a central role economically, politically, and there are security implications and economic implications for excluding them. I've come to the conclusion that societies that choose to exclude women and to ignore these issues do so at their own peril. There aren't examples of cases where societies in which women are overwhelmingly excluded or repressed that do well economically or socially. There are no cases that I can think of. So please join me in thanking our very expert panel, and thank you all for your participation.